Good morning, this is George Sambatera with PC Weather Products talking about what else but Hurricane Michael. There is Michael. We'll take a close look at it. Today is Michael Day. It has intensified overnight, unfortunately, and 145 miles per hour, Category 4. Outside chance of Category 5. Panama City is sort of the target. That whole area around the coast there, and if it hits, I don't want to say in the wrong spot, but it potentially could hit Panama City head on. That area is going to be, I think, devastated. So let's take a look at some of that. Where do we start? Why don't we start with recon? These are the flights through Michael just in the last 2 hours. And these are the vortex reports. These show the lowest pressure, highest wind speeds, 118 miles per hour at the surface, aloft higher. Some of those winds aloft come down to the surface in the eye, so a forecast wind could be one thing, but you might get a wind gust much higher than that. It may be starting to take the move towards the northeast now, and Panama City sits right in here. I don't want to say what the best track would be, but we'll look at it a little bit later. As far as coming ashore, the areas directly under and to the right of the storm are going to be most impacted, and there is some areas that are less populated, definitely to the right of Panama City. So if this would go more to the northeast, that would be good news for the most populated areas, but not good news for some other areas. So I don't want to claim anything is really good news at this point. Surface observations, some of these are reports, most of these from recon. I'll get rid of those so we can see the surface. We do have a buoy out here at 60 miles per hour already. These coastal reports don't sound like much. 17 gusts to 30, 20 gusts to 29. That's because the winds are still coming from an offshore direction, and so the land is helping out there. Once we're getting these onshore winds and the eye coming over with a lot of turbulence, those winds obviously are going to increase dramatically. A couple views of Michael. Here is the storm position, 8 o'clock Eastern time, and you can see the bulk of the winds are offshore. A good way of looking at that is, this is smaller, but you can see this is the wind pattern as opposed to just the quick way of plotting, which is just these areas. And it also is taking into account advanced wind estimation, so you can see how the coastline matters. Might zoom in on that a bit. Let's not forget these watches and warnings extend far inland, the watches and warnings. It's really just south of Atlanta, tropical storm warnings. I'm not sure the green, I'd have to break the legend out. Tropical storm watch, probably. Hurricane warnings. So hurricane warnings, tropical storm warnings over a big area, and watches in the far north. Those will probably change the warnings later, maybe 11 o'clock, whereas the ones to the west may be, in the south, may be eliminated. So this is going to impact a big area. The wind swath goes right through there, and I guess we'll just overlay right over the top. And this is not using advanced wind estimation, but you can still expect gust in the hurricane force range inland, all the way into central Georgia, almost into South Carolina, 50-knot winds, and then the 35-knot winds and gusts through this entire area offshore. It would be exposed areas would be higher winds, of course. Rainfall, heavy rainfall, almost just as much up in North Carolina and Virginia, which really don't need it. This rainfall amounts are up to 6 inches of rain down here. We're talking about 7, 8. Normal hurricane rains, if you want to call it that, because this is moving very quickly. So that's good news for the rainfall amounts, but still could pile up. And there's another feature that came on shore that helps the precipitation in here from the southeast. Rainfall in my local area at under 2 inches, because we're in the northwest side of Atlanta. If you go southeast, you're up to 3 to 4 inches of rain. At this point, there's not much mystery. Here are the forecast models, all converging near Panama City. We'll only look at the global models just to get a view of the track after it goes inland, right through the heart of Georgia, avoiding Atlanta, although I expect some power outages up here too, because it doesn't take much to bring trees down. And this stays pretty strong right on out, but by Thursday night, here we are Wednesday morning, it is offshore and going out into the Atlantic. So here is that image I wanted to show earlier, the tracking chart with, oops, I just knocked it out. Well, we'll just use this. This just shows the wind bands around this area, or the winds. You can see 144, 126, kind of small print. By the time you get near the coast, it's 60. But once you're inland using advanced wind estimation, the winds die down, but these onshore winds are not going to be affected by land friction, and that's where you start getting these catastrophic winds. Let's start looking at storm surge. And Panama City's in a somewhat favorable relative area because their elevation goes up pretty quickly there. So while these low-lying areas over here could see inundation values of 13, 14 feet, there's not much over there. I think it's mostly marsh. When you start getting to downtown areas, not a whole lot of flooding except along the west side of this little peninsula. Panama City is centered here. Of course, the biggest damage will be on the barrier islands out here, and we can zoom in on that area. So when you zoom in on that, you can see areas getting certainly some water. Biltmore Beach, West Panama City, elevation goes up to 12 feet quickly. Now we're running the slosh model for Category 4 heading north-northeast, 15 miles per hour under high tide. If it becomes Category 5, this could become worse. Why don't we run that? Category 5 picture is worse, as you'd expect, especially up in the western part. There you go, Panama City here. Water coming in off that bay. But compared to some areas around the country, the storm surge potential isn't as bad as some other areas. It doesn't help you much. So storm surge may not matter. Oh, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. You might think you escaped the bullet with the storm surge. However, if you're having a Category 4 or 5 storm, the winds themselves are going to wreak havoc. You know, look at areas like Homestead. That wasn't from a storm surge. That was from the winds. We did fool around with Google Earth here with the storm surge, and this is the area west of western part. Here's that peninsula, Panama City. The western portions, so coming in off the North Bay. If you zoom in, it's just to be a representation of what could happen, and you can. This has the 3D effect on it. And you can see definitely flooding in those areas expected. Kind of on the land side, from the northwest side, not what you necessarily expect, but it's coming in off of this bay on the backside, which is definitely going to be a potential with this storm. Okay, what we've done here is show the location around Panama City, and I'm just point and clicking for highest wind speeds. You can do this on your Eurotrack system also. Matter of fact, let me get rid of the wind radii there. All right, so here's Panama City. If we click offshore, show forecast highest winds 136, gusts to 177. This is using advanced wind, by the way. On the barrier islands, the same. Anything exposed, the same. If you get to the middle of this peninsula, for example, it drops to 70 with gusts to 91. Out over the open bay, we're up to 132. So a lot of local effects from the open water in the bays and the ocean. If you're over land, somewhat less. I'm working my way down the coast here. This is all, anything sustained hurricane force is damaging. Obviously, when you start getting to 100 and plus miles per hour, it becomes more catastrophic. Well inland, hurricane force still there in gust. And let's move this out. And let's throw the path in there so we know. So the path storm here, as we go further inland, the winds definitely decrease. This is using advanced wind. That is still 66 miles per hour because it's near the center. Up here, heading towards Macon, you've got a 45 miles per hour, 51. So generally through these areas, 50 mile per hour sustained. Trees are going to come down with gust to near hurricane force in some cases. Tallahassee, in case you're interested, 38, gust of 51. I expect it'll be a little bit higher than that in gust. 40 mile per hour sustained is probably not a bad forecast for that area. And here are some forecasts. We use the airport locations and using their, by the way, their roughness indexes for the calculation. But Panama City Airport, 95, gust to 124. That anemometer will probably be gone. Mariana, if you know where that is, in Florida, 80, 104. Albany in Georgia, 63, 82. Tallahassee, this is at the airport, 45, 58. The trends on these are all higher, by the way, from the last forecast. Pensacola, 40. That gives you some of the information. All these places are under hurricane warning or tropical storm warning. Well, we couldn't find any webcams that were operational. They're all timed out. So if you want to see the conditions, it's going to be all over the news. It is going to be a daytime landfall. So you'll be able to watch that on any of the news channels, obviously. Anyhow, that's really it for today. It's kind of a, I want to say a somber day, but you might occasionally see meteorologists excited about hurricanes. Any sane meteorologist doesn't get excited about this kind of thing coming on shore. They're fun to track and analyze and look at, but when they actually are going to be coming in at this kind of intensity, it's a different story. Anyhow, you have a good Wednesday. We may update this later today, midday, if we see a change from the forecast. What we saw earlier today. A new advisory will come out around 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Take care.